welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight with the LSAT Unplugged. My name is Ayaka and I'm a consultant with LSAT Unplugged, and I'm super excited today to have George Mason University Antonin Scalia's Law School Assistant Dean for Admissions, Ms. Sabrina Huffman, here with me today for an interview. This is really exciting. And before we dig into like all the questions that I always have about admissions and all of that, I would like to hand over the mic. So Sabrina, you can give a intro for yourself and how you got in, and tell us a little bit of how you got into admissions.
Yeah, of course. So first of all, I'm just going to go ahead and say this. George Mason University Antonin Scalia Law School is a mouthful. So moving forward, it'll just be Scalia Law School. Bear with me. That will take a lot of time if I just keep saying all the names. Sabrina Huffman. I'm the Assistant Dean for Admissions and Enrollment Management here at Scalia Law School. I've been at the school for about 3.5 years. I started off as a director of admissions and then was promoted to Director of Admissions and Diversity Services, and now I'm the new Assistant Dean. So I've kind of been in this position as an intern since November, but officially since May. I come from being at USC Gould, so I was in LA as an assistant director there, and then I was at Texas Tech Law School as an assistant director previously, and then I was at Wake Forest where I graduated, and I was a huge student ambassador. I kind of fell into admissions because I talked to the Dean of Admissions at Wake Forest and said, hey, I want to be you. And he was like, I'll show you the way. He really should have laughed at me and been like, no, that's not going to happen. You'll never be me. But he was very nice. And that's just kind of the admissions community. We all kind of know each other. And now I'm here in DC and I love it.
Wow. That's a great journey. And I love that you've been kind of across the US and now you're in DC. So this is amazing. And kind of digging right into admissions, with the school being in DC, I know there's a lot of connotations that go with that, but I would love to know for prospective students, what kind of student is like the right fit, and is there a right fit for the school?
Yeah, so one thing about Scalia Law School, some people know this, we're actually in Arlington, Virginia. So we're about a mile, and I point this way because this is where DC's at, which I'm pointing to my right if you're listening to this on the podcast, but we're about a mile away from DC. So we're actually kind of like the best of both worlds. We have some students who really like DC, who kind of like us because we're a smaller school and we're also a little bit cheaper. And then we also have some people who want to just be in Virginia or in the South, but they like us because we're cheaper and we also have all the opportunities of a smaller school. So when we talk about right fit, we don't really have one. We have about 66% of our students come from out of state. Only 33% come from in-state. I even try to break that down a little bit more and just kind of classify people of DMV area. In DMV, it's only about 15% of our students come from the DMV. So a lot of our students come in not knowing anyone, so they're really close. They get to kind of know their group. We have a lot of areas of interest, so we have about 15. So I never tell anyone like, oh, come to us if you're only focusing on national security. We cannot do anything else. No, we do a lot of other things. So I always tell people, right fit kind of means if you're excited to be at Scalia, if you're okay with your students, your classmates wanting to get to know you, if you're okay with your professors wanting to get to know you, if you're okay with me wanting to get to know you, because I'll remember who you are and I'll say hi to you. So that's kind of like the right fit, just knowing that you are going to be in a smaller school. That's kind of one of our big things. And then also just knowing that we do really focus on practical experience. So, we're going to encourage you to do that externship. We're going to encourage you to do that clinic. And sometimes that can be a little annoying, but we're only really thinking about you like the best of the heart. Career Service is really trying to push you through. So not really a right fit, but just more of a, hey, we really want you to be here and we want you to be happy. That's kind of my big thing. I don't want anyone to come here and not be happy with the school. So we really want you to be happy, and we're going to make sure you have things to be happy about. We hold a lot of activities. But at the end of the day, if you're like, I hate DC or I don't want to move out to the East Coast, we're probably not the right school for you.
Perfect. Great intro to the school and the student body. That's amazing. Just kind of digging more into admissions. I know students, watching this video or listening to this podcast are really interested in, how to get into the school. So, we all know all the elements that go into an application, but what I would love to know from you is, what does it look like from your perspective in looking at an application? Are you reading all of the essays that come in the application? Are you looking at the LSAT first, the GPA? What does that entail for you?
Yeah, of course. So we start off with the CAS report, which LSAC produces, which has the LSAT, GPA, and then also the letter of recommendations and the writing sample. That's the first thing we always read. And I don't know why, but that's how we do it here. And then we move on to the EAP, which is the application at full length. We read the personal statement, but we really do pay attention to the Mason statement, which is a required statement that is a way for students just to explain why Mason, why Scalia Law School, what made you interested in us. And then we move down to the resume and all the other statements. So I would probably say, if you're looking at which one is more important, or like what is your big gaps, obviously LSAT and GPA, everyone's going to tell you that's important. But we're used to having, some non-traditional students where the GPA is going to be a little lower. We're used to having some students who maybe just are splitters. Something happened where they don't test well, or their GPA just doesn't hold up to their LSAT. So that's not going to stop us from reading everything. We read every single application that comes through, start to finish. But we do really do focus on the Mason statement and the resume. That's going to help you kind of stand out to all of our other applicants.
I would love to double click into what you call the Mason statement, which is, the required piece. Part of the required pieces. And in that, I know there's areas of study that are strengths of the Scalia Law School. And should people tie or kind of not fudge, but force that statement into one of those strength areas or areas that applicants might perceive as like they need to hook it onto one of those things?
Yeah, no, great question. I have read a Mason statement. The student's going to kill me. I will actually tell you about two of them from our intern class. One of them met me at a law fair, and she saw my lipstick and was like, "I love your lipstick." And then she started talking to me, and she liked my personality. And then all of a sudden she was like, "Hey, this school's actually 2 hours away. Let me look into it." So her Mason statement saying, "Hey, I actually applied to the school because of Sabrina." And then when she started telling me about the school and the environment, then all of a sudden I was like, "Hey, this is I can see myself going here." And then when she came here, she went on the tour, she saw what I was preaching, and she was like, "Sign me up." The other person said that they met me on the road, and I told them about that we're like a mile away from Chick-fil-A, and that piqued their interest because they thought Chick-fil-A was not in the DC or the Northeast, which we all know there is now Chick-fil-A, but it's fine. So that was their Mason statement, but it actually showed that they did some research, or they at least talked to us. So no, you shouldn't force it. But I do think we offer a lot of areas of interest. We have a lot of clinics. We have a lot of different professors that even if it's, "Hey, I didn't hear about your school until you all sent me an email. And then I clicked on the email. I liked what you said. So now I went on your website, and I think I'm actually could be interested in Jamil Jaffer, national security, or Josh Wright, antitrust." Like, these are classes, or these are people who sound interesting to me, and I might want to take that class. That at least shows us that you did some research. The no's of the Mason statement is, one, there's a lot of different law schools in DC that might have the same first name as us. Don't call us them. We're George Mason. We're Scalia Law School. Also, we are DC area, but we are in Arlington. So if you're like, "Hey, I really want to be right next to the Capitol," it kind of seems like you didn't do the research. Also kind of telling us like, "Hey, I just applied to your school because you sent me an email." If it's only 3 sentences for a Mason statement, it's just going to show that you might not be as interested. And we might start sitting there being like, "Well, why would we accept you over somebody who's at least did some research?" So don't force it, but you can be really honest about it and say like, "I didn't hear about your school until the other day."
great.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm also like, when I was back in the day, when I was applying to
Mhm.
schools, I didn't hear about the school until way later. So I kind of feel for people who are like, I didn't know about it. I didn't
Mhm.
know about it either until I started doing research.
Well, that's great that you kind of honor honesty in that. So that's wonderful. Um, you mentioned a little bit about non-traditional students, and we get a lot of questions from the LSAT Unplugged listeners about how does admissions view non-traditional students?
Yeah. So we love non-traditional students. So a couple of things about our part-time students. So we actually have part-time students and then full-time. Because we have part-time, we're used to a lot of non-traditional students because a lot of people who are working full-time are usually non-traditional. And then we also have students who maybe are retiring from the military or are on their second career or maybe on their third career, or whatever the case may be, who are coming in full-time. So we're used to seeing these applicants. Being in DC, it's kind of easy for us to see those applicants because not a lot of people, if you're non-traditional, you might not want to move. You might have a family, you might have kids, you might have like a life that you're like, am I really going to move across country for a law school? So we do see a lot of these applicants. I'm a little younger. I'm not going to tell you how young, but some people have told me great inflation is a thing. So we always look and say like, hey, just because your GPA is a little lower or just even lower does not mean that you are not capable. At the end of the day, we're really trying to find applicants who we think can do successful here at Scalia Law School and also just go out past the bar and become employed. Because at the end of the day, that's what everyone wants to go to law school for. They want to come to law school, be successful, pass the bar, and be employed. So that's what we're kind of looking at. The great thing about non-traditional applicants is they have a resume. They actually have that professional experience, and that is going to be a way for our career services to actually make them stand out. A lot of firms are wanting somebody that actually has a resume that includes professional experience outside of the academic experience. So we look at the GPA, we look at the LSAT, but we're actually looking a little bit more on the resume side to see, hey, what have you done? What kind of skills, transferable skills can you bring in? Do we think you could be marketable? Do you think you could help us? Do you think you could do the work?
Yeah.
And surprisingly, a lot of non-traditional students, not even surprisingly, I don't even know why I said surprisingly, a lot of our non-traditional students can do the work. They've proven it by their resume. Like they've been in jobs for 6 years. They're committed to something. And at the end of the day, that's what we're looking for. So, GPA and LSAT is not going to deter them from being accepted. And we're expecting most likely the GPA to be a little lower.
Yeah, and you kind of touch on it with the resume, and we get this question a lot, and I know this gets into the nitty gritty of an application, but with those non-traditional students, sometimes their resume is super long. Even if they're in the workforce for a couple years, that resume can get really long really quickly. And so what things are you looking for in a resume? Is it accomplishments? Is it, maybe employee affinity group participation, or diversity participation? What are you looking for in that resume?
Yeah, so for non-traditional, you can put everything. So we have a lot of military students and they move around a lot. They will list everything. So it all of a sudden becomes a 2-pager, even though they're just listing that US Army or US like Navy, but all their positions underneath. So list all of your jobs. I probably would say, depending on your job, if you're going back to like undergrad, you could probably cut it. We love seeing community involvement. So we do see a lot of non-traditional students who have community involvement. That could be PTOs for their kids, PTSA for their kids. Elementary, we could see the church volunteers. Some of them are coaches, like basketball coach for their kids or just community basketball coach. We love seeing that. We do love seeing employee awards. We do love seeing certification. So if your IT, you probably have a lot of different certificates, or you probably took a lot of classes just to keep your skills new. We love seeing that. I would definitely say more is better when it comes to a non-traditional student, when it comes to a resume. I'm never going to sit there and say, why did they list something from 15 years ago, especially if 15 years ago they were still out of undergrad.
Mm-hmm. Great. And for those non-traditional students who have gaps in their resume for any reason, including parenting, is that okay to include in the resume, or is that something that you would rather see in an addenda?
I would highly recommend then putting it in the resume. And that way, just in case, if you have your resume and then we have the diversity statement and then we have all these other statements that you can apply and then your addenda's last, because for us, the addenda's last.
Mhm.
The person might not realize the gap. They might have already put the note in like gap in employment and they might not think to go back to be like, oh, wait, is this the gap she's talking about? Or is this the gap he's talking about? So I would definitely say go ahead and put that in there. No one's going to sit there and be like, oh, why did she put it in there? You're filling in the blanks. My number one thing I tell students is don't let the admissions committee fill in the blanks for you. Fill in the blanks for them.
Great. Yeah, that's great advice. And that kind of leads me into, we as a country, as a world, we've experienced the pandemic. And there are, students who are graduating out of undergrad right now who might have a change in their GPA because they switched classes to pass fail in the spring or fall of last year. There may be people who have gaps in their employment. How imperative is it to kind of explain that within the application?
Yeah. So the admissions committee consists of people who are a little younger, millennials like myself, and some people who may be classified as boomers or, the generation ahead of me. So I definitely tell people, go ahead and explain everything because you don't know who's reading your application and you don't know what they're thinking of that day. We're still in the pandemic right now, but you never know how March is going to look. You never know how April is going to look. So you don't want them to forget about the pandemic. Not saying anyone could forget about it, but it might not be the number one thing on their mind the day that they're reading your application. So I would say go ahead and explain it in an addenda, or if you can put it in your resume or even your Mason statement or anywhere, just go ahead and highlight that for us. So we're not sitting there being like, well, do you think they switched to completely online and that's the reason why their grades shrunk? Or do you just think it's pass fail and they just like checked out? Like, you never know. I could come up with 1,000 different scenarios of reasons why maybe the GPA dipped or there was a gap in employment.
Sure.
But I would rather not come up with those scenarios. I would rather just the applicant to tell me what it was and me be like, okay, great, moving on.
Right. Yeah. So give the information to admissions.
Yes. I have never clocked the amount of time I read on an application, but if I'm sitting there having to ponder why I think you were unemployed or your grades dipped, that's not going to be my favorite thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much information out there on the internet. And I always say, your students are always kind of eager to apply to, the top 14 schools out there. And there's so much information about that. But I've had a little bit of a career. So I'm a little bit more selective of what I'm looking for in a school. And so I think the research is as important as actually applying. And when students do research about the Scalia Law School, I guess I would love to hear from you. What are the good places to hear about, to learn about the school? I know that you have your website, there's LSAC, there's Reddit, there's other forums out there. What do you recommend?
Yeah, so I definitely recommend our website. And I know that's just very standard, but I also recommend going on our website and scheduling a phone call with an admissions worker or a student ambassador, because I do, to be honest, I know what people think about us. Scalia Law School, they automatically put us as a very conservative school, but you're going to talk to people who are going to be like, no, it might be a little bit more conservative than a lot of law schools, but it's because a lot of law schools are a little bit more liberal. So it's more of like a medium here. When we've polled our students before, some of our professors have just for their research, and we usually come out 50-50 or maybe, 60 liberal, 40 conservative. So like we're actually pretty even. So I always say Reddit, be a little bit more cautious about it because, people are automatically just going to assume the worst because that's what's out there about us. And I would hate for someone to just automatically exclude us, even though they don't know what we're offering. So go beyond our name. Talk to people. I will give you student ambassadors' names, but I also use non-student ambassadors, as in people who are not working in my office to talk to students. I'm not going to just say, oh, you can only talk to these 10 students. No, tell me what you're interested in. You're interested in a student org, I'm going to talk to the president. You're going to talk to that president. You're interested in a journal or clerkships, I'm going to find you somebody who's in a clerkship or in a journal, and I'm going to pair you that way. It's not always going to be a student ambassador. So it's not always going to be someone who has kind of like the script that some people think we use in admissions.
That's great to know. And I've looked around on the website. I can spend a good amount of time in there looking up stuff. So I think it's, a great advice to go and look. Last thing about the application process, has anything changed? And I know things can still be changing due to the pandemic. Anything in the process, how you interact with prospective students, anything of that sort?
Yeah, so this year I would definitely say it's not the application process, but it's kind of just getting to know us. We did open up tours, but we're not offering up classes, which is a little different. We used to have prospective students sitting in classes. That's just not the case. Contract tracing, we can't have students coming in. We are having tours, but the tour sizes are limited, so that's a little different. When it comes to the actual application, nothing's changed. We've been extremely lucky to kind of have this continuous spot on campus. Unlike some schools, we actually had 1L classes fall 2020 and spring 2021. They were on campus. So that means a lot of us were on campus still. So for us, even though we're all back full time, and that started about a month ago, we've kind of been around for the last year and a half. So we've kind of just been not used to it. So nothing has changed because of the pandemic. But yeah, nothing. I know that's kind of a boring answer. Sorry.
I mean, good. And, I think some of the good things that came out of the pandemic where people got used to, Zoom, or, kind of talking
Yeah,
on the phone. So
exactly. We switched over. We were really lucky. We switched over all of our admitted student open houses within the first 3 days of our campus closing.
wow.
So we started doing a bunch of admitted student events in March 2020 rather quickly, and then we kind of perfected it. So we've taken some of our personal touches, and we liked them a lot, even though we were having admitted students come on campus last year. So fall 2020 and spring 2021, we had admitted students come on campus. We still held our virtual events because we got a lot of feedback from them. People loved them. We realized, hey, you can have a virtual event at 9 a.m. People will attend. You can have it at 9 p.m. People will attend. It might be a smaller group, but we liked actually the intimacy. So some of our virtual events, you might be meeting with a professor. We only expect like 10 people to meet because we expect only the 10 people who are interested in that area to attend. And that actually makes it a really interesting conversation because you're coming with an interest. You can, maybe you read their article. Sometimes we'd provide what this professor was working on scholarship wise. So that way you can kind of question them. Or you can come kind of with just, hey, tell me more about your area.
Amazing. That's awesome. Kind of switching gears to life as a student at the Scalia Law School, which is kind of my favorite part. But what can students expect in that first year? I know there's a set of classes that are required, but what's the expectation there? Student body expectation?
So I don't think this is a surprise to anyone, but we are actually one of the schools that increased our 1L sizes this year. Shocker, I feel like everyone increased their 1L sizes. But one thing that we did is we actually added another section because we really do care about keeping our sections rather low in enrollment. So we have about 50 students in this section. Usually it's anywhere between 40 to 65. So, we saw what was happening and we were like, we need to add a section. So no matter what, you're going to see that you're going to be in a smaller classroom. Some of the time, some of our students, their largest class is their 1L class the whole entire time in Scalia Law, because we do like to keep our classes rather small. Something that you'll see that's a little different than other schools is we require economics for lawyers, which is Econ 101 and the fall semester of your 1L year. Every Scalia Law student has to take it. So it's kind of like, your ritual, it's stepping in. Some students hate it. And I would say some, a lot. Others, they're econ majors, so they love it. They're PhDs in econ. But at the end of the day, I would say most people think it's going to be a lot harder than it is. And, you can kind of just work your way through it. Students actually, they hate it when they're taking it, but once they're done with it, they see why it benefits them. They really like that they can kind of step back and evaluate a case on a different level. So that's a little different for us. we also have a lot of professors who specialize in econ. So we have a lot of professors who are PhDs in economics. So you'll understand that, you might be learning the same torts case, like the 1L torts case, standard one, but they might emphasize how that ruling affected the economy or how it could have affected the economy if it would have went this way or whatever. You're learning the same thing. They just might like talk a little bit more about econ. So that's always a little interesting for our students. Outside of that, there's so many different areas you can go into. There's so many different organizations, centers. We have a lot of centers here that like your experience is going to be different. It depends on what you're interested in. We have students who are really active in SBA. They're active in basically every single organization. They're student ambassadors, they're Mason mentors, they're all of them. And then we have others who are really just, hey, I'm here to go to school. I have a family at home. I like my classmates, but I want to come in and come out. And that's the reason why we have the Flex JD program, which is our new part-time program. We've always had a part-time program, but the Flex JD allows it for the first 2 years. So 1L year, 2L year, part-time students, you're only required to be on campus 2 nights a week. So you'll be taking 2 nights virtually, which is really nice for the part-time students.
That's amazing. And I love that flexibility on that flex schedule. So that's amazing as well to be inclusive of all types of students. I know you mentioned this a little bit earlier about, how students kind of get to know you as a student and kind of come together as a student body. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that student body culture? Is it a more collaborative culture? You hear kind of horror stories about law school. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned it before. A lot of our students don't know people here. They might know a friend of a friend or even a friend in DC, but not a lot of them are like, I have a group of friends in DC. I don't want to know you. So 9 times out of 10, your best friend is going to be someone in the law school. Because of that, it would just be kind of awkward if you're super competitive because you're hanging out with these people a lot. So all very collaborative, we really encourage it. We actually host a 1L class before 1L starts. It's kind of like a summer fun class. And we tell people in the syllabus, like, hey, if you're absent, you should share your notes. Like, this is what we encourage at the law school. Like, you should be used to sharing your notes. You should ask your classmates to share their notes because this is what we want. Like, go ahead and get buy-in to this culture. We do a lot of activities to kind of buy into it. We have a welcome back bash. It's annual every single year. It allows students to kind of get to know each other. So a lot of activities in-house. Also, a lot of our students live less than a mile from school. Probably most of them live 0.5 miles from school. So they're all going to the same Trader Joe's. They're all going to the same Whole Foods. They're all going to the same Giants. It's really hard to be competitive with people you run into all the time. And then because we offer so many different areas of focus, so many different clinic opportunities, you'll realize a lot of your classmates aren't interested in the same thing as you are. Like not everyone's going to be interested in immigration law. Not everyone's going to be interested in business law. Like that's just not the culture here. So definitely come here, very friendly vibes. And, most of these people are going to be like your best friends. I've met alums who were in each other's weddings who are still friends to this day, and they've been out 10, 15 years out.
Wow, that's a pretty tight knit group. So it's amazing to see that in law school. You mentioned it a little bit, but for students who are like, I really want to be prepared for my first year, I'm going in. And you mentioned the summer program or summer class. Can you kind of give us a little bit more details on that?
Yeah, so it's a summer class. It's always offered at like the end of July, usually for 2 weeks. Sometimes it's only 1 week, and it's from 6 to 9. So it's like law 101. So you're going to learn like the court system, you're going to read some cases. And then the great thing about it, the last couple of years, we've actually had different professors teach each night. And our Dean Randall, taught a night too. So that was really exciting. And it's just kind of a way for you to be introduced to law school before law school. So that's number one. That's like jumping on it. We never tell people to read books or any of that. That's not our advice. But maybe you couldn't take that pre-law, like that summer class. Maybe, you were on vacation or you were just busy or you hadn't been admitted yet. We actually, during our orientation, offer legal methods, which is a class that meets 3 times and it's like a 2-hour class. And that's also just intro to law. So you're kind of learning about the legal system before you actually step in to your first day of classes, which our students really enjoy. We get really good feedback on that class, and just also our summer class too.
Amazing. Like being prepared before your first year. That's great. And I love that the different professors are teaching each night. So, it's not just first day of school, you're meeting all your professors. It's kind of
Yeah, and during orientation, we also have a 1L professor panel. So we'll put the 1L professors together, and the students can ask them questions.
wow.
And depending on who's teaching what class, sometimes you're actually with two sections, so your professor's never going to remember you from that class. So it's really nice because you can kind of like submit questions anonymously.
Wow, that's so cool, and that's amazing to get that, like, not one-on-one, but a very close relationship with not just your peers but your professors, and that's
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And I know we talked about it a little bit here and there, but just interesting areas of study available at the school. I know you mentioned immigration, econ, I'm sure, and you said 15 other areas.
Exactly. I'm like, the list goes on. So we have a really strong intellectual property that is housed with our Center for Intellectual Property and Innovation. And innovation would be startup companies. So that's intellectual property and also startups, big thing. National security, kind of what we're known for. Antitrust. We actually have an antitrust week for our on-campus interviews. So employers will send their firm here 1 week for just general, and then they'll come back another week just for antitrust. So kind of what we're known for. We also have, immigration. We mentioned that. We have starting in spring 2022, sorry. We have started up a federal Indian law clinic. So we're focusing on federal Indian law, tribal law. So that's hopefully popping off too. So we have those classes. We have students who are interested in public interest. So we have a public interest and advocacy concentration. We also have free speech clinic, which kind of falls into that too. We have a Supreme Court clinic. So, if you're clerkship, that's kind of a really popular area. We place really well when it comes to clerks. We actually had a recent alum who graduated 2 years ago, who's now being a clerk for a Supreme Court justice. So that's kind of a big deal. Administrative law. Also, I could just go on. It's a lot. So I will keep it short. So basically 15 areas. And if we don't have it, we're always thinking of ways to bring in adjunct professors to teach the students who might be interested in that area.
Amazing. And I love that there's, clinics that go along with it, and alums and the network there. That sounds amazing. And speaking of clinics, externships, other opportunities outside of the school. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how students can get involved? I know there's students out there who want to get involved day one. Some students might not, how can we get involved?
Yeah, exactly. So one good thing about our law school is, I kind of bringed on it before, we have a lot of centers, and centers are a research hub, and that's a way for 1Ls to kind of get involved. Fall semester, focus on your classes. Yeah. Do not do anything outside of classes and some student orgs. But during your spring semester, those centers can actually hire you as research assistants. And that way you're already working with professors one-on-one, you're researching, you're also getting paid for it. So that's always really great. And then after your 1L year, that's when you can start doing, externships, clinics, all of that. A great thing about Scalia Law School is, even though we are rather small, we've actually established a lot of new clinics in the last couple of years. So I mentioned the federal law, Indian law clinic. We established the immigration law clinic. We established a poverty law. And then we also established the innovation law clinic. So and free speech. So the last 4 years, we've established 5 new clinics. So we're always establishing new clinics. So that's always a great opportunity for our students to kind of get more opportunity to be involved. Externships, we're so close to DC, we're in Virginia, but we're also close to Maryland too. So some of our students do public interest externships in Maryland with the counties there, with like the public defender's office. We also have a bankruptcy court externship that students enjoy. And then we also have the Capitol Hill externship, where you're actually working on Capitol. So those are kind of ways to get involved. Other times, sometimes our students take that externship And that leads into maybe like a semi-permanent or temporary job that might last 3 to 4 months. So they actually switch to part-time so they can work full-time and get that full-time work experience. And then the next semester they switch right back to full-time.
Oh, wow. Okay. So there's a little bit of flexibility in that schedule, which is
Yes.
amazing. And I'm like, I'm so interested in all of these. I want to talk about it all, but just time.
Exactly. I'm like, I told you, I can talk a lot and we have a lot to talk about. So, but yes, there is flexibility to switch full-time to part-time, part-time to full-time. And a lot of our students do that.
That's amazing. And I know this full-time to part-time, I know you talked about a flex. I know there's an online LLM program as well. Can you kind of just give us a general overview about what kind of degree programs there are? And I know there's a lot, so we don't need to cover all of it, but
Yep. So we have our standard JD program. The JD will have flex JD and full-time JD, which technically there's also a part-time JD because the flex JD is like new. So some students are like in a part-time JD program. But at the end of the day, it's JD, and just depending on your credits is where you fall. Then we have a Juris Master's program, which is residential and also online. And that's going to be like a master's of science and law. So, like maybe you're in a career, maybe HR or a police officer or government. We have some people who work for the FBI who are in our Juris Master's program. We have some journalists who write a lot about legal items who are in our Juris Master's. So it's kind of, hey, I don't want a JD, but I kind of want to understand the law. Those people go into that program. Then we have our residential LLM program. That includes antitrust, US law, that includes national, like SIN, so cyber and national security, and then intellectual property. And then we have our online program, which is LLM, and that includes US law and antitrust. And then we just established 2 days ago the Flex LM.
Oh,
And
wow.
the Flex LLM allows students to take advantage of the DC Bar's new ruling where it says, hey, as long as you have these 26 credits in these courses and you're a foreign educated attorney and it comes from an ABA school, you can sit for the DC Bar. So we now have the Flex LLM just established 2 days ago. It's on our website.
Yes.
Link, picture, everything involved. And that's also a new program. So a lot of new programs here. Our school is growing, but also with a new dean, Dean Randall. He's named one of the last decade's transformative deans. He comes from iLaw. So, he's clearly, thinking of these creative ideas, thinking ways to be innovative and, kind of change the legal field.
That's amazing. And I took a look at your website right before this and I was like, what is this? I don't know. And, so this great explanation of the new offerings that are happening. This is amazing. And I think being innovative in that's great. Kind of bringing it full circle. I would love to hear, what is it doesn't have to be one thing, but what is your favorite thing about the Scalia Law School? I know there must be many, but.
Oh gosh, this is a tough question because there's so many. One, I really do like the people here. I think at the end of the day, our students are amazing. They love being here. They're super creative, though they sometimes challenge each other. I think it's a good way, like we encourage that debate. And that's kind of one thing that I love about our school. Maybe you disagree with your professor, maybe you disagree with the student. It's not going to say, hey, don't speak your opinion. It's going to say, okay, argue your opinion. Let's go. Let's bring the cases together. Let's hear both sides. Let's have this, very active dialogue. At the end of the day, we all want to learn from each other. And then at the end of the day, also, all of your staff, the faculty, they're going to get to know you, which is also nice. I see students who come in from 1L year. I see them 3L year. I see them at Trader Joe's with their families. And I'm like, oh, hey, it's me. Like, don't know if you forgot me. And they don't. So I think it's really nice that you're going to have that support system. And you're also going to have people who are just kind of open to your opinions. So that's one thing I really like about the school. I also could just kind of name that I do love that sometimes we do cornhole tournaments. Sometimes we have a casino night for our students, but that's neither here or there. If it's just really about the Scalia law, it's that you're going to be supported with a tight-knit community. And then we're always willing to try new things. we establish all those clinics. We're establishing all these new programs. You're never going to hear us say, no, we've never done that before. It's going to be like, no, we'll try it.
If I may double click into that a little bit, or is that kind of push forward for establishing new clinics or stuff like that? Is that usually student-led, faculty-led, both together? How does that work?
Both together. Sometimes I actually heard a story from the director of our Center for Law and Liberty. He said that he talked to our former dean and was just like, hey, we should tap in this. And then like a week later, our former dean was like, you're the new executive director of the center. And he's like, wait, what? Like this was just one of my ideas. Then we have some students who are like, no, I really want this. They'll send emails to our dean, they'll talk to the other deans, and all of a sudden we're like, this is a great idea. We should support this. We have alums or friends of the community that are like, hey, we want you to try this. Here's some money. Here's our support. We will support you. We will teach these classes for you to get this out. So it really depends on what it is. But at the end of the day, Dean Randall, he loves talking to our current students. He's known to give out his cell phone numbers to all of our current students. It's actually his cell phone number, as a lot of people try it out. They're like, is this really you? And he's like, it is. He's really here just to listen. And because of that, he's so open and willing to learn that, and like listen and kind of do new things, that staff, faculty trickles down. No one's going to sit there and be like, oh, no, we shouldn't try that. I always tell people, just in missions world, I'm never going to tell someone like we shouldn't do this idea for recruiting, because that's just not who we are at Scalia Law. We're going to just try it once.
That's amazing. And I love that culture of being open and kind of putting ideas out there and kind of trying things out. That's amazing. And that's a hard culture to cultivate. So yes, it's amazing that it's coming from top down. Well, this has been a very, very informative conversation. You bring such a bright energy, and I love this. If students who are looking or interested or listen to this podcast and want more information about the Scalia Law School, can they reach out to you? And if they can, how can they reach out to you or admissions?
Yeah, so I would definitely say they could definitely reach out to me. I always tell students to reach out to Law Admit. So it's LAWADMIT at gmu.edu. So LAWADMIT at gmu.edu. That's going to be your best bet, because that way we can filter you through everyone. So maybe you have a question about me. Maybe I said something, you're like, hey, I want to connect to you. I want to talk to Dean Huffman. They're going to forward that email. But maybe you're like, hey, I want to learn more about the Juris Master's program. They're going to forward it to the right person. So we usually try to get everything in Law Admit. Our assistant directors answer that. Our admissions coordinator, I sometimes go in and answer those emails. So it really is like an all hands on deck. But that way you're not lost in an inbox, and I don't want to say lost in an inbox, but you're getting directed to exactly who you want to talk to. Our graduate admissions program, Brian Bennison, he's the director of admissions. He loves talking to students. So I'd hate for you to like send me an email, I answer it, and he's like, oh no, wait, Sabrina, we could have elaborated a little bit more. We could have told them about blank, blank, blank. And I'd have been like, oh, dang it. So definitely lawadmit at gmu.edu. We also do a lot of we're having virtual events. We have prospective students on campus, so you can meet us that way, or you can schedule a phone call.
Great. And for those students who, may want to tour but can't travel due to any sort of restrictions out there, is a phone call the best, or virtual tours? Is that something that you guys are doing?
Yeah, so we actually do live virtual tours where you can actually ask us questions while we're walking around, and we'll actually answer your question on camera. And it's we did it for our admitted students this summer, and everyone loved it. It started in March, but we got really great feedback on it. And I don't want to give away our secrets, but if you can't come out here, definitely schedule a virtual tour. You won't regret it. It is one of my favorite things that I invented. I know virtual tours aren't new, but the way we do it, it's a little unique. And I promise you're going to get a lot of information in those.
Oh, okay. So I am excited to see one of those. Well, thank you so much for all of this great information. It has been a pleasure talking to you. And we will leave links to reach out to admissions in the description box of the video. So please check it out. And also check out the website. There's a lot of good information there. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Sabrina. This has been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. And as I told you all, please feel free to reach out to us. We're also will be on the road recruiting. So if you see me, please come say hi. I love talking to students.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.